Welcome and thank you for tuning in to JonBenèt Sketchy Details Part 4. If you have not watched Part 1, Part 2, or Part 3, it's highly advised that you watch those before watching this one, and I will leave a link for those in the description box below. So we left off with Part 3 ending in a deep dive into Patsy's psyche, different issues with the kids, and different symbology relations between Patsy, the book, and the pineapples. So it's only natural that I start out Part 4 with number 26 being a deep dive into John and John's past, as this is something that we know very little about. So John was born on December 7th, 1943, in Lincoln, Nebraska, and his father's name is James Dudley Ramsey, and his mother is Mary Jane Ramsey. In 1966, John Ramsey joined the U.S. Navy and served as a Civil Engineer Corps officer in the Philippines for 3 years, and then for 8 more years he served in the reserve unit in Atlanta. His first wife, Lucinda, would bear him 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy, and his second wife would bear him 2 children, 1 girl and 1 boy, totaling 5 children for John Ramsey. John's mother died in 1978, the same exact year that him and Lucinda got divorced. 3 months after the death of John's mother, John's father, James, married Lucinda's mother, Irene. It should also be noted that John's father, James, died in 1992, the same year that Elizabeth, his first daughter, died. All 5 of John's children had bedwetting problems. So the years John was stationed in Atlanta was during 1979 to 1981, and that was also during the time that him and Patsy met. This is also the time that in Atlanta a string of 30 child murders happened in the black community. But we'll go back to John in just a little bit. So Randall Simmons was arrested July 2nd, 2019 on 16 counts of encouraging child sex abuse between August 2018 and June of 2019. This is the same man that the Ramseys would hire in the early 1990s to photograph JonBenèt. He is the one that took the glamour shots of JonBenèt. He's also the one that was calling different pageant mothers in the middle of the night crying, saying that he did not kill JonBenèt and that he thought a paramilitary wanted his photo negatives. He was also in trouble for selling JonBenèt photos after her death. But he wasn't the only one to be caught and get in trouble for selling photos of JonBenèt's body and or having photos of JonBenèt on them. In January of 1997, a developer at the Photograph Laboratories, Lawrence Sean Smith, was arrested for stealing and selling autopsy photos of JonBenèt Ramsey. Smith was assisted by Brett Allen Sawyer, a private investigator at the time and former Boulder County Sheriff's deputy. Photocraft Laboratories was the developing center used by the Boulder County Coroner's Office to develop their film. And then a James Parton was also arrested in Columbus, Ohio for possessing and distributing, I believe, photos and or a photo of JonBenèt Ramsey's body. It's worth noting that James Parton's father, Alan Parton, was a retired military chief who was charged in military court and served time for molesting his own daughter. And then, in 1998, a Richard Bruce Thomas from Fort Collins was only one of a few people to be arrested in what was dubbed the Wonderland child porn ring, and he also had a picture of JonBenèt's body on him when he was arrested. And speaking of pictures of JonBenèt, let's move on to number 28. When investigators and detectives finally got a search warrant for the Ramseys' Charlevoix, Michigan house, once there, they discovered in the basement of that house that somebody had a very, very unhealthy obsession with JonBenèt. They discovered this by finding a huge photo album that was just dumped in the basement of nothing but JonBenèt photos. One of which she was completely naked at about the age of 3 with a seductive look on her face and a feather boa around her waist, and that's it. And on a little side note, some of you may remember that in the beginning weeks and months of her murder, people were saying and asking, like, why isn't Burke scared? Why isn't Burke worried that he's going to get kidnapped or killed or blah, 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 right? Well, fuck that. I want to know why Melinda hasn't came forward and why Melinda isn't scared, considering she's the only girl left out of John Ramsey's kids. I would be scared that I was going to die next. Both of my sisters were killed, probably by the hands of my father. Are you kidding me? I'm going to be terrified. Maybe that's why we've never heard a single fucking word from Melinda on JonBenèt's murder. That is very, very telling and interesting to me, I think. Where is she? Why hasn't she spoken on it? For number 29, we're going to take it back to the early days of the investigation and how I don't remember if it was at the same time, like on the same day and same night, or if it was, just relatively close together. But Detective Steve Thomas, woke up one day to a skinned cat lying on his porch. And Detective Linda Arndt woke up one day to have blood splattered across her front door of the house that she was living in. And I don't know about you, but to me, those seem like signs from very sick people to stay away from this investigation. For number 30, I want to know why Susan Stein was never arrested for her crimes in this case. Let's go back and remember exactly what Miss Susan Stein did. So, at one point, or 2 points, Susan Stein testified on the Ramseys' behalf in front of the grand jury 2 different times, okay? After the whole first couple days of the investigation, the Ramseys moved in with the Steins for a little over 4 months, okay? At that time is when the cops were trying to talk to the Ramseys and they were evading them. So the Steins, mainly Susan, helped evade the police for the Ramseys, right? So in criminal law terms, they were harboring a fugitive, right? So that's a charge right there. Anyway, after the Ramseys go to Atlanta, the Steins end up following them to Atlanta. And while there, it's found out that fraudulent emails were being sent to different people throughout the different media sources, from Chief Mark Beckner's email account, pretending to be him, okay? The chief of police, pretending to be him and saying things in favor of the Ramseys, right? Once those were found out, they did their little investigation into that. Turns out it was Susan Stein who was impersonating a police officer and sending fraudulent emails to different media sources. That is a felony. Why wasn't she arrested? Like, that's ridiculous. And last but not least, on December 23rd, the day of the Ramseys' Christmas party, when someone somehow dialed 911 from the Ramseys' house phone and then hung up. When the police got to the Ramseys' house to see who had called, what was wrong, it was Susan Stein that greeted them through the Ramseys' intercom and told them that everything was fine and to go away. Well, what's so sketchy about that, you ask? Okay, well, first of all, it wasn't her house. It was the Ramseys' house. So why was she assuring the cops that everything was fine with the Ramseys? Second, she did not let them in, so technically the cops never saw if the situation and the scene was all right and secure. Secondly, just the second one is the biggest one. Like, she used the intercom to shush them away, so they never saw anything, and they never heard or saw the Ramseys either. So that's fucking stupid. Like, I agree that Boulder police did drop the ball, but all the scrutiny that they received afterwards for, like, purposely botching it and just all the backlash was not really necessary, because they were sabotaged at the same time, so. But for 31, we're going to go back to John, as I promised. So, John's dad, James Dudley, was the head of aeronautics commissions in Nebraska and Michigan during the same time that a guy named Francis Sheldon constructed an airstrip on North Fox Island in Michigan. After construction of the airstrip in the mid-1970s, a huge scandal busted out when it was alleged and caught that there was child porn being produced on North Fox Island by Sheldon and his billionaire friends. At the exact same time, we have what is known as the Oakland County child murders, or the Snow murders, where 4 young kids in Michigan were kidnapped for a series of days, the longest one being held for 19 days, and then were later on found, displayed, most of which were in a few blocks, if not doors, within viewing distance of different police stations in that county. And these murders happened between the years of 1976 and 1977. Now, going back to reference the Atlanta child murders I just told you about, in 1979 to 1981, so on that case, there was an FBI profiler named John Douglas. This would be the same John Douglas that would be hired by the Ramseys to be part of their defense team for the JonBenèt Ramsey case. How it also ties to Boulder is that Tom Kobe in the late 1970s was a deputy police chief of Houston, Texas, under Lee Brown. Lee at the time was Atlanta Public Safety Commissioner who oversaw the 30 child murders. Tom Kobe is starting to look a lot more suspicious now, even though he already did, because of the way he went about slandering Detective Linda Arndt, because I feel she's extremely important in this case. She never wrote a book like everybody else did. She did go on TV, whatever, but it's like, come on, think about it. If you knew information about a seriously sick, fucked up case that nobody was talking about, that a lot of people knew about, wouldn't you feel like you would want to go and like at least say a little bit of something, even though there's like a gag order on everybody that's involved? Anyway, moving on to number 32. I don't mean to keep bouncing back and forth from different decades into different people, but when you're trying to make like a timeline of the connections between everybody, it's impossible, because the connections go back decades and the connections bounce from people to people, like all over the place. So we're going to jump back and talk about Patsy and her past again for a little bit. So as I told you earlier, her father was a 32nd degree Mason who has lots of connections, okay? Well, her own connections that she acquired through the beauty pageants were, when you become a beauty queen, whatever, especially in your state that you're representing, because she was Miss West Virginia, you do different functions, different charity balls, different political events, okay? So she came in contact with Robert Byrd. Excuse me, I had a brain fart there for a second. Not only that, because Robert Byrd was the governor of West Virginia at the time, she was also in close contact and worked for John Rockefeller. But before Patsy's pageant days, Patsy was a rainbow girl, or part of what is known as the Daughters of the Rainbow, which is a subsidiary created by Freemasons for the daughters of Freemasons, but only girls aged 4 to 10. The town I was born in has a still standing but unused lodge for the Daughters of the Rainbow. Anyway, So Freemasons are widely associated with the black and white checkered floorboard, as they use this in all their lodges, usually in the Great Hall. And what do you know? Surprise, surprise, the Ramsey's Boulder house had black and white checkered flooring in their kitchen. Now, Masons have specific symbology for everything, including the black and white checkered floors. But there's another big group of people who also have their own symbology associated with the black and white checkered floors. Well, black and white checkered anything, really. I mean, even stripes and dots. But this group, however, is called many different things. And on the surface, they might appear to be polar opposites. Heck, most probably do not even know each other. But make no mistake, they are all aiding the same agenda. They are all different fingers on the same hand. And this group consists of multi-generational ancestral families, certain military families and military factions, as well as the Hollywood machine, which to me includes the political machine. Now, I may lose some credibility with some people right now, but that's not what's important. What's important is that these kids are helped because the very people that are supposed to be protecting them are betraying them. If you do not know what Project Monarch is or MK Ultra, then you need to go and look it up yourself. This is not a video about that. It's not going to talk about that in this video, though it does relate to this case, so yes, I am bringing it up. It's very valid in this case, and I am almost certain that Patsy and JonBenèt were being programmed and that John was the handler. We see the checkered pattern being used with Patsy in her kitchen as well as being used with JonBenèt in her pageant outfits, okay? However, we don't see the rainbow symbology with JonBenèt, only Patsy, and I think I know why. If you read the document that I left the link to in the part 1 of this entire series, then you'll remember that within that document, it said something to the effect of that Patsy knew how to come off sexually as younger than she really was. So I feel that during Patsy's Rainbow Girl days, she was programmed to revert back to a childlike state so that she could sexually please people who were pedophiles, while actually being an adult female woman. Thus, her kitchen floors being the tool or trigger that was used to keep her in that state for John, to sexually please John. If this were true, it would also mean that John had control over Patsy in more ways than a lot of people could imagine. This could explain her participation in what happened to JonBenèt, along with allowing the sexual abuse against the kids to go on for as long as it did. It would also explain why Patsy was so fucking drugged out during the first days and weeks and months of the investigation. And Patsy was dying. Whether or not anybody wanted to face it, she was dying. So I feel like John was trying to replace her for when she did die, with, lo and behold, JonBenèt. Now, why wouldn't she need the rainbow programming? Because she is a kid, and that's what John was into. So she didn't need to act like a kid, because she was a kid. She just needed to be programmed to disassociate, to have the dual personalities, so that she could perform sexually for Daddy, yet act innocent and like a kid in public, as to not give Daddy's dirty little secret away. Now, why would I think John has the ability to do such things? Well, his military ties and the fact that he was in the Navy. The Navy is what started the MK Ultra projects. Once your eyes are fully awakened to the real world that we live in and all the signs that are around you, you cannot unsee the truth. My eyes see the truth. If yours don't yet, keep trying, because you'll get there. But do not go around and preach and aid into the deception of every living human being. Anyway, this is where I'm stopping part 4. There will be a part 5. But before I go, I just wanted to add something that I forgot to add into number 29. Sergeant Bob Wilson had 4 shots fired through his bedroom window, one of which almost grazed his head at the same time that the skinned cat and the blood were found on the other deputies' and detectives' porches. But thank you for watching part 4. Part 5 is in the making, and I do not get paid for my content. I'm not monetized on YouTube, but I do wish that you guys like, subscribe, and share, because the information in these videos and the questions are important. And don't worry, part 5 is where I explain more of part 4, because I know that this has kind of left you guys like, well, what the fuck is she talking about all these different people and times for? Well, you'll see why in part 5, trust me. Evil on this scale is impossible to comprehend. To know who murdered JonBenèt Ramsey is to know what world we live in, where we are.